Hey everyone, welcome back. I'm going to talk about the topic about dating back then in the old school days compared to now, even from if it's decades before us. Fascinating how we're able to evolve so much, and it's a lot of parts and pieces of it where it fits so well, and the stuff with modern dating these days, there's a lot of accessibility to it, and there's ways to we can become better. And there are some things that are at the same time. There are certain aspects and pieces within that as well, where to the point where there are some people who don't really feel that they connected to the past. In other words, they don't understand how we're able to get to the point where they don't use it to the advantage per se, but more of find a way out outside of the dating realm. They give up, and we seen that online these days because a lot of things holding them back, or about how they have to deal with fear of rejection, which I'll get into later in this video. The structural nature of dating in the early 20th, like early mid 20th century, like 50s, 60s, 70s, like, like probably 50s, 60s mostly. It's like those classic type of style dating where they would pick up the rotary phone and call them, and you would find out right away if the date will happen or not. However, there's like this rule what they had where they had to draw 2 days before, so the lady can get ready. Versus now is where you just make up your mind whenever, and then it's you can get ready right away or get ready for a date later than usual. So then it's so different, and it's still the same core idea. The foundation of the idea is still the same when it comes to finding out if only if the date is happening, or about the way how it leads up to the date eventually. Most guys has to go out back then versus now where it can go either way, which is actually that's better. And the thing is, regardless of who has who out back then, it's the fact is the guy will have to meet the parents of the lady, and then they would get like comfortable around them, and that actually is brilliant. Just that I really wondered why we didn't incorporate that these days. However, back in the old days when the date was being set up, depending on who it was, or regardless who it was, and it was on side note, but in the old school days, it was rare for women to ask out the guy to be introduced to the one or both of the parents from right in the beginning of the date. And not only that, they would usually be out a little bit later than usual. The date will start later at during the evening, so then probably the fathers would be home from work, so then they would be have a they would have a sense of who the guy is and how he treats the family who are in the house. And versus now, it always depends on if the person is alone or not. I'll get more to that a little bit later in the video. And now that we have, whenever people would go out back then, they would usually be around like teenagers or young adults. They would be in like around their high school era. With now, it's basically like it's many different stages of their lives when they're early 20s or late 30s or so on. There's a lot of the age range is different compared to how it is back then. And back then, mostly the teenagers in high school, they would have their friends like in their surroundings. They would observe the relationship while they're probably on doing their own, focusing on their own relationship, and vice versa, where it's not only school but social media. Anyone can know your way of dating if you choose to share it online, and also if how you were able to learn the different perspectives of people dating back then and now in the now era. It's about how you would see if a relationship is even for you or not. And that's been really impressive how that was we able to. That's actually something a lot of people use to their advantage, is the knowledge they are able to bring in. Use ways to, if they put in the effort to commit to becoming better for themselves, and they value the way they understand the foundation of dating, and based on the historical context of their dating experiences, or from connecting from historical selves. For example, if people would learn from, they would learn how to become a better person based on their ancestry, their family, or the friends, or like generations down the road, or back the road. If that makes sense. They would find some ways to connect to the past one way or another, versus back then where it felt like they were like all living in the present. And it's interesting because it's like they slowly felt like they were focusing on the present, and then we got slowly improving up to the point where we're able to, it's like we just jumped into the stages of how people date now. At the same time, I understand that's not the case. I understand there's a lot of different highlights of how dating was casual back then versus how diverse it is now. And we're talking about this in a global scale. It's something that we have more options with how we see and perceive dating. If that's something that we're into, actually desiring to do. Certain aspects of traditional dating, such as genuine connections and meaningful conversations, are still valued to this day because it's something that we are able to do due to us having so much access to learn how to find our own path, to set ourselves to what we believe and believe is important to us when it comes to being with someone who we can appreciate and have something meaningful within others. I'm going to go over some key bullet point type of elements to within these 3 articles I found about dating back then that I find interesting. The evolution of dating, what changed then versus now. Basically, this talks about how basically the same stuff that we can do, and a lot of people are more focused on the idea of being with one person at a time, and versus now where people can have options. Something that's in some aspect the same that I try to find anything different on is the how many between the comparison of the old days and modern dating, of how many people date certain people until they find the one, lean towards marriage for them to settle. It seems that it's the same type of style, except the modern dating aspect as the number is larger, because people were, just because hookup culture is more modernized and feels normal to so many people these days. So that's the only difference there. But other than that, it seems like they would settle until they feel ready to be married or something like that. And that goes for both the old days and modern times. The online dating and amount of people we can date bullet points do make sense. I feel like they correspond with one another because they would have it's all optional and it's more accessible at this time. People back then, based on like classic old shows that people watch, where they would call the girl and go on a date, they would do it locally within their community versus now where they're able to travel anywhere in the nation or the world to wherever they see fit, and that's something that's not a part of the optional point of dating. Where it's not just the person, it's the location as well. One of the core reasons why this is men pay for the date is because not a lot of women back then worked, so it would make sense for them not to be able to pay for the date, but they probably didn't afford enough to pay for the date. I'm looking up something that says, were women allowed to have jobs back then? And it says women were largely limited to low paid and poor says occasions for most of the 19th and 20th century, and they were less than men for basically doing the same work. And even though in the 20th century the labor market shifted, the point being is that it does make sense why the men would usually pay for the date back then, because uh, things were easier for the men compared to the women back then, and we're at a point where it's so much easier for either gender to make their own type of money and their own variation of money to the point where they can, each gender can support themselves, and that's the big difference now, is that they don't have to rely on someone else if needed, and I understand that that's also probably not the case for. I understand that the women didn't need the men's money back then for a large portion of the time, but if they were able to work, you know, work, except for like the Great Depression after World War II. That's a whole other thing. For being this, I'm talking about the 50s or 60s or something like that. Women were able to support themselves and get by slowly but surely, and in this day and age, it's so much more accessible for women to focus on themselves and support themselves in any way possible, individually or with someone helping them out financially. So yeah, that's something that is very important to point out. Yeah, let me know what you think about this. Is there something I'm missing here? Am I on point here? Let me know, and I'll be happy to talk to you in the comments. Women are able to have jobs now to the point where they don't have to just rely on the date or anyone else. They're more independent now versus back then. Similar to what I said about the people back then, when they date, they were mostly focused on one another because they didn't have options. So I felt that they were more into settling, and they would be more into their timeline of dating wasn't short when it comes to them being single or dating, to the point where they decide to get married a little earlier than usual. And with us now, it's the years average torture before marriage is like 3.5 years. So it's people are more, since we have a lot of options these days, we more so want to discover or more curious if that person's right for us, on the fact that we seem like we have more options depending on the person, of course, and see if they're fit for us. So then we would, based on the fact that we are able to we gain a lot of knowledge throughout the decades, and people would usually compare based on their experience of dating or their interests or background of their way of dating. They would see the ways to they will see if that person will be right for them. It would take a little bit longer than it would back then, because they have more things to think about, and they prefer to not settle down, but more so see if that person is right for them, because it's something that they want to know they're making the right choice for this person. I recently just mentioned something about options been dating, and it's felt like I looked up and it's basically one and the same. Usually people would back then would have social gatherings that basically it's kind of like a double date or double date where they would be get to know the person with their friends and same for the other side, and they said that it feels a little different than how double dates usually are in this day and age, but because it's this one is more vast, because it's more social with technology. So um, I'm thinking about the word options here because it's the way this is that it's that I'm saying that they have a lot out there or just pursuing people left and right at at such a large amount back then, and that wasn't really the case. I feel like it was just a normal type of old-fashioned type of dating that was casual, where it was they would date, and if it didn't work out, they would break up, and then that person would probably move on to that another person, and then maybe so on and stuff like that. So it wasn't compared to now, where people just date left and right, like they're like swiping left and right. It's that's a little bit of a difference there these days. Back then and these days. So that's something I thought about when I said the word options. Let me know what you think about that. Let me know if options within dating in the old school days fits in that time period, and would fit, and would that is it comparable to how it's now? Let me know your thoughts on that. I'm not getting into much of number 5 about being intimate or anything like that. However, what I will say is now, today, in this day and age, for the people who actually want to be committed, who have multiple partners or have ways they would, or something along the lines of sleeping with other people, they would usually have. It's not about, I want to say, they didn't lose trust. It feels like it was something. It's something so different there. They want to experiment and try to see if there's actual connection within all this. And it goes back to the idea of the whole options thing. It's however I don't really see how that person can find connections in that way without experiencing the most important part is the beginning of the dating to the point where it will lead to something important, such as this, regardless of if they get intimate before or after marriage. It does depend on them if they're ready to, and everyone's different. They have their own way of choosing what they want to do. And let me know if I'm wrong with that. I don't know. I don't want to get into that part too much. However, I will point out that it's alright to have different opinions about this topic and everything else I speak about, because it's something that I want to learn from, and learn from how to learn what to do and learn what not to do at the same time. And go through a majority of my videos here where I would talk about ways of becoming a better person for myself and everything along the lines of that. Alright, moving on. Like I said about back then, it's all within the surroundings, the community, and also with now, where you can do road trips and travel, where they would feel more independent and free from staying out late or anything like that. Along the lines of that, 10 ways dating was so much better back in the day. He used to have to fight for you in girl days, man. Where gradually when the affection of a girl, he was interested, but being kind to her and showing her that It'd be a German disease or it is sensitive or typed out online and a day is said. That's true. Well, I feel like that's one and the same at the same time because you're basically doing different things except it's the length of it all. It's what they do and how they do it, and which is important to the topic of the video. However, it's something that there's effort in both of those key points there. That I feel like the men back then would be very direct with this. Now they would have to find creativity within their ways of finding their own style of being not direct, but more so clever to stand out, or about going overboard or making them opponent uncomfortable. It's not just and for the present part of it. It's not just the guys and vice versa. So there's a little bit of that's the only thing that's not one and the same with that is it was mostly the guys back then. Yeah. People were trying to a deeper level. They didn't used to help you find out things about yourself and the kinds of people you like, potential couples will get to know each other deeply over time as actual human beings. Doesn't seem to happen now in many instances. Asking too many questions, get someone labeled as being clingy online dating allows people to find out common interests before they even met, leaving them to delve into their. It's saying people would connect to a deeper level. I understand that it could be one and the same and also a trend. However, the thing that is important to realize is that people used to be more social back then, and that's something that's actually the one thing that stands out compared to now. Is they're connected in one way, and now we're connected another way. I don't know what the opposite of, I don't know the right word to use other than in social. Okay, so listen, it's interesting to see how this is. So I looked up this thing. It says online interactions can translate into what sociologists call quote social capital. Resources based on network goodwill fellowship in the dating scene. Individuals can leverage their influence or the beneath of their networks to attract potential partners, much like how wealth or social standing have been used in digital age. So it's more about the influence of that dating scene, the influence of how social we are with each other. Help me out here, is that what do you think about this? Because it's interesting how there's so many ways to be connected here. Help me out here. This is interesting how all this is going on. It's a more concrete direction. These days, no one ever seem to figure out what they want, and that dating scene definitely reflects that. They used to have a specific purpose, and that was to find someone you could potentially spend the rest or at least a good portion of your life with. Dates were much more goal oriented. That's something would make sense. I do agree with that. That we actually, that's how it was back then. That's more different now. So I think it's more positive for the people back then who would see dating in that way. You didn't have to wait ages for a simple reply. I totally agree. I don't even need to. We does it so simple. It was all simple back then, and we were actually direct, and they were actually. It was like as if they knew what they want immediately, and even though the word immediately is little broad. It's something that always goes back to the options thing where for the modern dating age is where we want things to be simple, yet we found we overthink of it all to the point where it becomes complex and complicated to the point where people would feel overwhelmed or exhausted with the whole dating thing, to the point where some of them would give up and then never not wait for them in, or maybe they would overthink the idea of one person and to the point where the date doesn't happen at all because they would think of the word simple, and they would, and by overthinking over time, when it comes to modern day now, when it comes to people who think of idea of dating one person could be simple to the point where they don't even try, because by them overthinking they would actually change the word simple to not fragile but more, they would see it as something risky. They would that's more better. They would see like a potential risk there on something that's simple to the point where the date won't have it all, and that could have been something brilliant for that person and for the person they're interested as well. And it goes both ways too. So like both partners would think about it one way, and also their experiences, are they ready to date, or do they have people like the social circle that are that would butt in or get involved, or would they, or do you feel like, or people would feel alone, like they would feel like they were alone in all this, they would think that all their friends are dating except them, and then it was so many ways through all this. People back then took the risk, but in a way where it was actually direct and simple for them, which is fascinating how that is. And we are able to always wonder, like, would people, by watching this video, would people think about dating? What if they dated that person in that time period, or vice versa? What if people who did date back then would date that person now in the same age, and the way we're able to, the fact that we evolved and became differently in the way we see dating and see marriage and friendships and everything in between. Dates were mostly planned. They used to actually mean that went on well planned for dates. Today they were more fun. They're more like finding a time, at least. Literally what I just said here about like the stuff happening within their lives. That's not just about their dating life. They have their careers and personal lives and other things that they have certain priorities as well. However, it's also important to also know that when it comes to being with someone, that will have to also be your priority as well. So that's something that's more we're able to see through that. We're able, some people who date these days, they would actually turn their love life into priority, and that's something that I really love seeing people do, because it's something that is important to them, and that's something that they're willing to commit. And it's even better when it's both of them, or both partners are able to do so, that they're able to truly connect with the world around them, regardless of what life throws at them. Does they have a lot of obstacles that they have that they are able to do, and it's also it always depends how stressful certain things are for them. If they think about some of the stressful stuff, and that way, because no life is perfect in that way. So that's actually really important to think about. Yeah, that thing, this is actually something that's completely different. And honestly, I think that's for the better. I feel like picking up people from their home, that's great. But that was back then. The lady who lived with the parents. However, nowadays women live alone, and it's not just that, men too. And there were people who would track them, and once they find people these days, stalk people or get crazy with a person, like try to like learn like certain things about them that are truly uncomfortable for them and aren't ready. And that's something that I'm glad that we left that in the back then, because people would go. You never know how far people would go to that information about you, to the point where all in your business and not giving you respectful space, to the point where they would seem unapproachable later on, and it would turn into a problem. So that's something that I'm glad not a lot of people do these days. And some people who do date, they actually do go to their house or apartment or whatever later on after the first date or so, and it works out for them. That's great. It always depends. At least at this point in time, now we have social media and we have people in the friend group or anyone online like that who are more overly protective and more like everyone has it in some way. We have a lot of eyes on us, regardless if we're online or not, and it's always about, it's actually really good to keep people who want to be safe, which is important for people to feel safe, regardless if they're dating or not. So that's actually something I'm glad we moved on from. Love letters within. People still do that now. That's something that can be done now, and it's even more. That's still a thing, and that's way more fun than it sounds. And a lot of people who, if you do write love letters, let me know. Or if you receive one, let me know what you think about that, because it's something that is timeless, and I really glad we haven't moved. That's something I'm glad we still have. It should be going on forever. That's more genuine, authentic, heartfelt, and more purely highly expressed. I love that. Yeah, that was like more simple back then, more direct, and all these things. It's basically the same thing, like similar conversation when that bridge closer. Oh, clever. Yeah, makes sense. It's as I okay, we're done. Okay, yeah, okay. And then with that, move on. And now people these days would get more attached, and then they would get depending on the person, of course, or to the point where they would either move on fast or would go back to the point where they would want to start over with the person if they both are willing to, and or they would convince the person otherwise, like back them or anything like that. Also, it depends what a break is for them. A breakup or a break or space. It's a lot more aspects of it these days. Dating used to teach you actual life lessons. People used to learn a lot from the process of dating, how to interact with people, how to express feelings, and how to politely go out and accept rejection. These face-to-face interactions were all great ways to build up your how to be a human being. Sharps today, we have the safety net of doing all of that behind screen, making life lessons more difficult to learn. He says that Dane used to teach us actual life lessons, and 10 ways Dane was much better back in the day. So that last part and this title, they don't really correspond. That's basically saying the artwork itself is literally saying that it's literally one and the same. And yeah, I actually agree with that, and we're able to learn different ways. It's just the way we learned how to become better human beings. That's the only difference. It makes us more community based and versus social based, and even from a larger standpoint, like the eyes on you topic I just mentioned. 5 day and quick rules that will take you straight back to the 50s. It's just a step by step ways of how to set up the date. How people back then used to set up the date versus how being approached, and also that being German, that's actually important. That should be timeless as well. That will go a long way. Overall, there's a lot of key differences and similarities between dating in the past and present. The most important thing is to value the core principles of the connections we are able to have now based on the ways people used to connect with each other back then, and that will also on top of that have mutual respect alongside that, because that will go a long way. Yeah, so let me know what you think about all this, because it's something that I was very interested in thinking about all this. I did mention other videos, such as what if your friends were involved in your dating life, or and I didn't ask that. And let me know what other topics you want me to discuss about this whole dating thing. This is really fascinating. Hopefully you enjoyed this episode, and I appreciate all you for watching, and thank you so much. And before I go, I just want to let you know I have a Patreon where I talk about where we react to TV shows, and I have a new podcast show within the Spoiler Territory podcast coming up about creative writing and all these things. If you want to check that out, I'll leave a link in the description. But yeah, other than that, have a wonderful day. I'll see you soon. Bye. Thank you for watching this episode. I really appreciate all of you who tune in. You can listen to this episode on Spotify for podcasters, so you can hear the audio version of this, and I'll see you for the next one.